Our next author is a 2004 recipient of the prestigious Pleiades Honor at the world's oldest poetry festival, the Struga Poetry Evenings in Macedonia, for having made significant contributions to the modern world of poetry. He also was awarded a Hawthornden Fellowship in the UK and nominated for a Pushcart Prize in the USA. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome on stage Mr. Sudeep Sen.
Good evening, everybody. And thank you, Tishani, for a lovely, lovely reading, and good luck with the new book. It's really nice to share this stage with her because, amongst other things, apart from she being a very good poet, I published her first book. So that was... Anyway, so one of the things that struck me while this festival has been going on is the theme of spirituality and love. So I thought I'll start this poem called, it's titled Offering, and it's for all of you. The kindness of libation, lyric and blood, her endless notes left for me little secrets, graces, trills recorded on blue and purple parchment to be lipped, tasted, devoured. Only the essence remains, its stickiness, its juice, its memory. Seamless juxtaposition, the brute and the passion, dry of the bone and wet of the sea, coarseness of the page and smooth of the nib's iridium. I try and trace a line, a very long line. The ink blots as this line's linear edge dissolves and frays, like capillary threads gone mad, twirling in the deep heat of the tropics, threads unraveling, each sinew tense with the want of moisture and the other's flesh. There are no endings here, only beginnings. Precious incipients, translucent drops of sweat, perched precariously on a collarbone, waiting to slide, roll unannounced into the gullies that yearn to soak in the rain. Heartbeats shift the shape of globules as they alter their balance and color, changing their very point of gravity, constantly deceiving the other. I stand wanting more of the bone's dry edge, the infinite blur of desire, the dream, the wet, the salt, the ink, and the underside of her skin. This is a poem which arises out of my experience living in a big city. And one of the things that is very, very difficult in the modern world to find in a big city is the whole beauty and song of silence. A lot of my friends call it a very morbid obsession, but I love graveyards. And instead of death looming around, I just find a lot of living people lurking around. And this is a poem which comes from that experience. It's a sonnet, and the title is a translation from this excellent East German filmmaker Wim Wenders' Wings of Desire. Inside closed eyes, even the stones come alive. This great tombstone bears a name, letters looping in serif tails, a monogram, some dates, and something in parentheses effaced. The sun rises very early in this part of the country, lighting only the solitary visitor who braves the frost. Every morning for years, a woman in black stole, solemn, pale, lights 3 candles and places a red flower on the tombstone that sits squarely, cracked, moss-ridden, wedged by 2 rocks amidst overgrown weeds, discarded reeds, and a shrub of thyme. With eyes closed, hands clasped, body wrapped in dark linen, kneeling, she prays long, silently, alone. with no one else except for the monolithic crowd of stone slabs and epitaphs. She whispers to the stone at the close of every ritual, and the inscriptions on the rugged granite listen, while the stone shifts at the end of her prayer, staring wide-eyed. This is a poem I wrote a long, long time ago. This is a very old poem, but I want to read it because it's a poem about death, but it's also a poem about celebration. And I was very close to my grandparents, my extended family, and this was a poem I wrote when my grandfather died of a heart attack. And I was very, very far away from them, from my family. And in fact, I was there when he suffered the first heart attack in the hospital with my grandmother. And I was writing my thesis at the time. I was very far away from Delhi. And my grandmother, who was very close to me, she says, until he returns back to Delhi, I'm not going to speak a word. And the last two lines are essentially in the English translation of what she spoke in Bangla, in Bengali. Dadu. 3 years back, I held Dadu, my grandfather, through the second attack in the intensive care unit, surrounded by smells of doctors, disinfectants, drugs, and his sweat, as he convulsed fiercely, fighting for life. I held him all the way through, watching the beads of his sweat glisten among the neon-lit panels, pipes, pins, graft, glucose, as he cried out breathlessly for life. The dreaded moments, struggling, gasping to live. I was just as drenched as he was. I saw his eyes closed as he lay there silently, with his heaving chest rise and fall as all the sweat beads rolled down his sides. He breathed back, barely, to yet another survival. I wasn't present there this time, trying to hold him again from 10,000 miles away. I overheard by mail Didu, my grandmother, absolutely cold, choked, pale, spoke the only words she has spoken since. All our grandchildren, except you, saw him. You weren't here this time to save him. I'll just read two more poems. This is a very short one. This is from a book called Rain, and these are prose meditations, prose poetry. And this one is called Longing Rain. The very last drop of rain perched on the edge of a navel. The last bead of sweat balanced on the feather of her eyelash. The last long wet of my kiss on her skin. All these demand more, more, more. More wet, more wet. Yearning for more rain, fire, desire, moisture. And the cool chill of crystal water. Thirst, saliva, longing, rain. Thank you, and I'll end with a poem called Prayer Flag, keeping in mind so much of aspects of bhakti has been talked about. And this is my little homage to my travels in the Himalayas and my long time I spent in the Himalayas. Prayer Flag. Om Mani Padme Hum. Oh, the jewel in the lotus. One, Manas Sarovar, Mount Kailash. Frayed, flapping in the high winds, prayer flags gently unravel. Homage to the day's first light. But today the dawn is not as bright, though heavy, brooding, silver gray like the lake's shimmering glass top. No one is here except for a woman staring far away, wrapped in her sanctity of continuous linen, her own sari like a prayer flag, though devoid of any color. She isn't mourning or crying, just gazing fixedly into the water's changing glimmer as the sky's wet wait and the shore's rocky line meet, their edges meanderingly melting into the lake itself. I stood far behind her, behind everything she saw. She was only an accidental figure in the widescreen frame. Unlike her, I was looking skywards through the prayer flag's translucent cotton, counting each thread of each piece of cloth that wove private stories whispered only to me. Weather-worn, strung across canted multiple horizons, I tried to map their own geographies, each an island, each with its own terrain, texture, inscription, and scripture. Found on the highest points on land, as close to the sky as is possible, these magic carpets, shapes caught on an unintentional clothesline, were more meaningful to me than this vast monastic scenery. How each flag, each one must have preserved secrets that only their owners knew. How each, a talisman, exuded safety and calm, shrouding away grief for the briefest while, when one forgets everything, real, imagined, and just dreams. My own piece of cloth that I had once tied onto this line wasn't visible to me now, but that did not matter. I found strength in this procession of private passion, in these flags' lack of starch or hierarchy. Their stories passed down by one flag to another, toggled hand in hand through time and age, just like my pet yellow butterfly, who infused each flower in my garden with the gift of life without any show or fare. I like the transparent quiet here. I also like the wind's occasional sound, its severe current tearing through the flag's heart, picking out the perfect pitch and melody. A memory now, a still, framed, not revealing to the world what I had once seen. The panorama's generosity, its wild, stark untouchability, how each story is stitched and preserved like the jewel in the lotus, its crystal fine edges caressed by petal's soft skin, until everything falls inward like a fetus in a womb, a toppled, misplaced comma, my own implanted memory. And then they bloom, fanning outward, each flag, strand, story, each private grief and pleasure, chanting noiselessly in the mountains' silent winds. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sudeep Sen, ladies and gentlemen.